Okay, you guys, it's one of those days. I have to tell you that, like, I feel like this day has been like really hard already. I woke up this morning and I was texting one of my organizer comrades from back in the Lights for Liberty days, for those of you who were here with me back in 2019, about just the way in which it feels at the moment like like we're just headed toward horror. And even the people who I rely on, generally speaking, to kind of talk me off the ledge when I need ledge talking, which is not very often. I actually had a moment this morning when I was talking to her where I was like, this isn't normally me. I'm not normally this person who is, generally speaking, like feeling kind of hopeless, right? I was definitely in that place when I woke up this morning. And I have to say that I don't think that's actually all that surprising given where we are. I want to talk today about grief because that's really a huge chunk of what's going on and the way in which it's kind of coming out in the process of what we're living through, because I know that a lot of you are in that place. Many of you know that I've been conducting these interviews for this program that we're going to try to get off the ground at some point this spring. And one of the things that's been really interesting about the like 35 or so interviews that I've done so far from people in this audience who are like already really accomplished organizers is that everybody is fighting despair right now. Everybody is fighting this thing of how do I make a difference in this environment, and how do I talk myself out of it? How do I motivate and inspire other people through it? Because we're all living with it, right? And it's this moment that is looming of noon on Monday now, like 4 days away, where it all becomes real, and it sucks, right? So I want to take some time to talk about that today. It's Resistance Live, by the way. I'm ECM. And we've got some other things going on the Hill today. They're really quite serious, actually, that we need to talk about. But first things first, for our visually challenged viewers today, I'm wearing a gray mottled sweater. My thick gold hoops are in. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I'm sitting in front of my bookshelf and my yellow cart, and the big cushy chair is back there, for those of you who remember that from California. I've got, tea on my desk that, I don't know if you guys can see this. The inside of it says "Walk in Peace." And I'm doing my best to do all the self-soothing things that I know. So I'm here with you all and seeing the comments float by, and everybody else is still kind of like in that place as well. And it sucks. Like, it really sucks. Like, we have to kind of acknowledge it. I did this meditation practice this morning where one of the things that that it talked about was kind of healthy discomfort, right? That there are moments where we actually do feel anxiety, and we do feel rage, and we do feel fear, and there are moments where those are like totally legitimate reactions, right? Like having those kind of emotional responses to where we are right now is normal. So I wanted to mention one thing before we move on to like the usual politics of the day, which is that there is a piece out this morning on Substack that actually is on my blue sky this morning. And I really wanted to share it with everybody because it's relevant even to some things that have been happening here on this feed in the last couple of days. So last couple of days, I've unfortunately had to block some longtime followers here for reasons that like made me really sad, right? And I don't need to go into the details of it, but essentially the overlining thread of this is that, there was a lot of rage directed toward me. Not blame, but just rage. Like somebody really lost it about the fact that I didn't finish the word cluster on the broadcast the other day and claimed that I had done it because I thought it would get me more followers, when in fact, like, it works the opposite way, because if you curse on YouTube, the algorithm will sometimes suppress your content. But also there was someone who yesterday was like, why did you even come on the air? It was only an 18-minute broadcast. If you don't have time, don't bother. I don't need this, really nasty stuff. And so the article that is pinned this morning, not pinned, but very close to the top of my Blue Sky feed, is about the fact that people lash out when they are sad. And it brought me to this big realization that that one of the things that's happening right now is that we're all so uncomfortable and grief-stricken. Like, how could you not be after that speech that Biden gave last night, right? With all of the things that I actually also thought were disappointing about it, it still was a point of like real grief, like a real moment of, oh shit, sorry, there, I just broke my cursing rule. It's over, right? Like the interstices between Trump 1 and Trump 2 is over. Like, it's over now. even though we've still got a few days left and there will be pardons coming and other things that usually happen at the end of a presidential term. But I mean, you couldn't sit through that speech and not be like, okay, I guess that's it. And, if you're in a place where you're feeling like it, and truly, I think this is where a lot of the anger just generally out there in the world right now is coming from. Some of it's legitimate. Some of it is this coming out sideways. I think it's honestly about this thing of like, is the American moment over? This is also a question, by the way, that has been coming up in some of the interviews that I've been doing for research purposes, where people are really asking, like, is this the end of the American experiment? And, my response to that as an organizer and as someone who believes that hope is a practice is that I still have faith in all of us, right? I still have faith in the capacity of people to come together and save lives and make a difference. And I know all the stats about the fact that it only, like this is in my book, that it only takes 3.5% of a population to affect like societal change, like really widespread societal change. There's a study out of the UK that actually like documented this. It doesn't take everybody, doesn't take 50%, doesn't even take 25%. And so from that standpoint, I know that if we can manage to pull people together and pull people together in a way that is really about a politics of caretaking, we will probably mostly, not entirely, but at least somewhat be okay, right? And so I have to kind of move through that in the same way that I think we all do. And, from the standpoint of what I do on this broadcast every day, I want to give you all that, right? That like the answer to the grief is in working together. The answer to the grief is in community, and things will get worse. They may get very, very, very bad as soon as next Tuesday. And the way that we're going to get through it is by stitching ourselves together in one big quilt. Like that's really the only way that I can see that like we actually stand a chance of making a change, is if we all kind of come together and move in the direction of trying to find a pathway through this where we care about one another, right? Where it's really grounded in this idea of caring about one another, taking care of people in our own communities, taking care of our loved ones, and receiving care. Like this is the other thing, because I think for a lot of you who have been mobilizers and organizers, including people who like absolutely worked themselves to the bone during the 2024 election, one of the things that has been really tough is that as leaders, I know I suffer from this, we don't ask for help when we need it. And a lot of us right now are really burnt out. And some of that despair is coming from exhaustion, just absolute exhaustion. So don't forget as well that there's nothing wrong with receiving care and receiving help when you need it, right? This is why I actually reached out to one of my comrades this morning was to say like, shit, like I'm in this place that I don't recognize. I'm in this place that doesn't feel normal for me. Like, what do I do about it? And, she talked me off the cliff so I could come here and start talking you guys off the cliff, right? We have to do this for each other and together. But I do want to just acknowledge that there is just a profound degree of grief right now in what we're living through and in the experience of watching things fall apart. And that's leaving aside Los Angeles. It's leaving aside the loss of loved ones that, I'm seeing float by in the comments. Jen Bloom, my thoughts are with you, sending you and your loved ones my deepest condolences. I just want everyone to understand that that is a part of the terrain that we are going to navigate. And you can't shove it away. You can't numb it out. You can't avoid it by lashing out at people online or parasocially attacking people like me or by taking it out on your loved ones, right? There's no way through the grief that doesn't involve feeling it. And it's not just the grief of like now, it's the grief of all the lost possibility. And that's really real. Like, I think I mentioned it on the broadcast earlier this week, but Liz Plank did this whole piece about looking back at 2015 when like even in your own life things may have sucked. They definitely did in mine. And thinking like, but at least like I had a different kind of hope then, right? At least I hadn't had 10 years of this. And I can't not acknowledge it, right? I can't not acknowledge it. There is a basis right now to really understand what's been lost. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not any way through it. And this is where the dangerous point comes, because if you tip over the edge of grief into despair and hopelessness, that's the place where like all hope is lost. I hate to put it in those terms, but it is. It's like turning that corner, as opposed to being like, okay, so the future that we thought we were going to have isn't here. The future that we thought we were going to have as recently as 2.5 months ago is not going to come to pass. And we now have to deal with the reality of where we find ourselves, which doesn't mean there's not another future down the road that might not be a bright one, right? That might not result in a better future for all of us, right? But we're definitely not going to find it if the place that we turn to is all hope is lost, it's over, it's done. And so I just want to encourage everyone today to be real with it, right? To understand that grief and sadness and fear is definitely in the mix, and anger, all of that is normal for what we're living through. And I agree with the person in the comments who said it's also the anticipatory grief for what's to come, and all the people who are going to be hurt, and the lives that are going to be lost, and the families that are going to be broken up, and the forced pregnancies that are going to have to be carried to term, and the impact on trans people. I mean, it's just, there's just so much there that is being held in this container of that could happen. And it's horrifying, right? It's horrifying. And yet the thing I just have to keep saying over and over again is that it is stitching yourself into a web of community that will get each and every one of us through this where we live, that will get us through this together, that will move us in the direction of something better. And that's like really the only way through. It's really the only way through. Isolation isn't going to do it. You know, like stepping away and saying that this is it, I'm out, isn't going to do it. It has to be something that is about like building relationships of care and love and intimacy and support. That's the pathway back to something else. And so, yeah, that's what I have to say about that for today. And for the person who is asking me in the comments, did you feel this way the first time he took office? You know, it's interesting. I had a conversation this morning with one of our audience members, you know who you are, about this exact issue. And I don't think anybody felt this way the first time around, because there was a faith in the institutions, right? And I've taken a lot of flack for this, you know, because I was only like, I don't know, 4 years out of practicing law when I kind of became internet famous for this broadcast the first time around on Facebook. And a lot of us who had worked inside those institutions and had been, to be like, I'm going to use this word intentionally, indoctrinated into the idea of their infallibility, I think held the belief that I know I did for a certain window of time, that there was no way that he could survive the application of the law, of the separation of powers, of the impeachment clause, all of those things, right? And as the dominoes have fallen, that has shifted our worldview, right? And I'm not alone in this. Like Joyce Vance has written about this. I've heard Barbara McQuaid talking about this as recently as yesterday. Lots of us who are lawyers who have been, you know, at the highest levels of the law, right? Like, you know, we're talking there, U.S. attorneys, right? I practiced at one of the top 20 largest, longest standing law firms in the country for a very long window of time. Like you know, the thing about it was that the first time around, there was a belief that those structures would save us. And now we're at a place where, while some of those democratic institutions still stand, and I'm going to remind you all of Timothy Snyder reminding all of us that we have to uphold democratic institutions for as long as we possibly can, right? Don't shit on the Department of Justice. Don't do that. One of the things that we do also have to recognize now is that when it comes to like the day-to-day thing, what we're relying on is local government, state government, if we're in blue states, and one another. That's it, right? Which is one of the reasons why it's ever more important that we get ourselves into community. Like just, you know, find the organizations that are doing work on the ground. Create your own community pod. Make sure that you know you have a phone tree for your neighbors, right? That you know who in your community is struggling. That you know who on your block might need your help. And also that they know you, so that if something happens and you need help, they know, you know how to reach out. All of these things are incredibly critical right now. So anyway, that's that. All right. Who wants some Schadenfreude? So I always try to give you guys a little something to laugh at. Rudy Giuliani, as of the time that I went on the air, was 2 hours late to his contempt trial for failing to pay up to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. This is after literally like 2 weeks of trial prep where this judge has absolutely excoriated Rudy Giuliani for his excuses, for not turning over his like car and his watches and his Yankees rings and everything else. This is not going to end well for Rudy Giuliani. That's all I have to say about that. And I think there's like a moment here where this judge is going to absolutely have had enough. And this is probably it. So that is something to watch this morning if you're looking for your daily dose of joy, which we all need. We all need it right now. Okay. There's 2 bits of breaking news this morning that are of deep concern that I just want to kind of like, I don't know, raise for awareness sakes. The first is that Mike Johnson has removed Mike Turner as the head of the House Intelligence Committee. So for those who don't know, Mike Turner is one of the few Republicans now left who was a stalwart opponent of Putin and very much in favor of funding Ukraine. And of course, in his role as the chairman of House Intelligence, he's part of the Gang of 8. So he was exposed to all of the deepest intelligence that the United States has on what Putin is up to. His removal as the chair of House Intelligence is a very bad sign, because what it likely signals is that his replacement will be someone who is far more Putin friendly. Now, we don't know who that person is going to be yet, but there was a lot of alarm on the Hill yesterday about this when the news broke, because it's seen as one of the few backstops from a foreign policy standpoint against the incursion of Russia in other directions. Now, speaking of that, there's some additional information today that is more than a little disturbing out of Reuters, which is that the Polish government has announced that they uncovered a plot by Russia to put bombs in the form of cargo, like packages, onto planes headed to the United States. Now, we're waiting for more details to develop about this. I do want to be clear that at least the first breaking news on this morning was that it was cargo planes, not commercial airliners. There's some confusion about that, but the first reports this morning at least said it was cargo planes. So this is just a sign, assuming that it is true, of the rope that has been extended now in terms of the leash around Vladimir Putin. And having spoken, this morning to people in Europe, and having friends, including an intimate family member living in Paris right now and family members in Paris right now, there's a lot of fear at the moment about the proximity, right? And about the rise, of course, also of far-right politicians, including in Poland, in the EU. And the fact that if Putin isn't restrained, he's going to march right into Europe. And so we have to be, deeply aware that the mechanisms that are happening inside the US are not by accident, right? That Mike Turner being removed is not random. He's a Republican, right? And so I just want people to be, I'm not trying to scare anybody because we've got enough of that day in and day out right now. But I do want people to be aware that there are signs here, and there's been actually a fair amount of reporting on it in the last 24 hours, that backstops are being shifted. And that in addition to that, we're already seeing Trump again take up Russian talking points with regard to Ukraine. We're seeing the GOP do that. And that means very dangerous things in terms of the general world order. So be aware. And I personally am curious as to who we're going to see as the new chairman of House Intelligence under this new regime. All right. We have ongoing confirmation hearings this morning. Today. Oh my God, you guys. I have these moments where it's like we have gone from the sublime to the absolutely ridiculous. So Deb Haaland is our outgoing Secretary of the Interior. Today, Doug Burgum who ran for president, of course, you all remember this, is having his confirmation hearings to take over the role of Secretary of the Interior. Lee Zeldin is currently being questioned to be the head of the EPA when he's a climate change denier. We have a fellow who's a former NFL player, and I've written down his name. I think it's Eric Scott Thomas. I think that's correct. I can't read my scribble. This one went totally over my head. I had no idea that this guy had been nominated for HUD, but he's being questioned this morning in a confirmation hearing. Apparently has literally no experience in housing and urban development. So, we'll see what happens with that. And then we have Scott Bessent, who is, of course, Trump's choice for the Secretary of the Treasury, also in his confirmation hearing this morning. This is all happening very, 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 very fast. Like, it just feels like the pace is picked up very quickly. And that's after Pam Bondi's just appalling performance yesterday, which we talked about on yesterday's broadcast, in her confirmation hearings yesterday on the Hill, along with many others, right? So the dangerous thing about this moment in relation to the confirmation hearings is that there really doesn't appear to be much of a backstop, with one exception. Apparently, Republican senators who have met with Tulsi Gabbard are not impressed. And there is some leaked press right now moving in the direction of her not being confirmed as DNI, which is a really good thing if it happens. Like, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. There's some speculation it's because she used to be a Democrat or whatever, but like, apparently in some of these interviews with senators, like, she literally didn't even know very basic things about how our national intelligence services work. Wholly unqualified. I don't think anybody can doubt that. But also, huge fan of Assad, now deposed dictator of Syria, and of Putin. Not somebody we would, generally speaking, want as the director of national intelligence, overseeing all of our intelligence agencies inside the United States, right? So we'll have to see how that unfolds also. I have to say that I think, no one can predict this at this point, because Pete Hegseth 2 weeks ago was a goner, like, was not going to be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. And after what happened 2 days ago, anybody's bet. Like, it's really anybody's bet. So I am, watching all of this with the same degree of horror that I'm sure all of you are. And we're not gonna lose. Rather, we're not gonna win on most of these, if any. And so that's very dangerous. Now, somebody asked me this morning on the Patreon feed. Reminder, you can become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive if you want to ask me questions, and I will answer them in writing for 3 hours before the broadcast or on the air. We had a question this morning over on the Patreon feed about how cabinet members can be removed. And so if they can resign, of course, they can be asked to resign, or they can be impeached. There's only one instance in the history of the United States where a cabinet member was successfully impeached, and it was a long, 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 long time ago. So I would not expect, once these people are confirmed, that they will be leaving unless and until they fall out of favor with Donald Trump, which, by the way, happened a lot in the first term, like, lest we forget. He had more turnover in that administration. Does everybody remember the big board that used to be behind Rachel Maddow with literally 36 names of people that were gone in the first year? Like, you couldn't even keep up with them. So from this space, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen when confirmation votes start, because really, once these people are in, yes, Trump will eventually sour on them, because he eventually sours on everyone except for the people who line his pockets. But there's not going to be really any way to remove them unless and until they quit. So that's not good news, right? It's not good news. And for everybody who's like, 25th Amendment, I have to remind you, because we haven't talked about this in a while here, that the 25th Amendment is not just up to the vice president. The 25th Amendment requires a majority of the cabinet officials to also vote in favor of removing the current president. And all of the people that he's installing are being installed only because of their loyalty to him. So there's not really going to be any likelihood of the 25th Amendment being invoked here unless he's truly incapacitated, can't function at all, in a coma. So again, I just want to remind everybody that, these kind of straws that people are pulling on, once all of this comes to pass on Monday, and then we have confirmation votes, are going to, make it much more difficult in terms of pulling back power. Now, I still have hope about the slim majority in the House. I don't want anybody to neglect that we are still in a situation where we have the slimmest of GOP majorities there, right? And, you know, if somebody's sick or somebody is otherwise incapacitated there, they won't be able to pass anything. So that part is good. And we have to be thankful for small favors. And also, I will just remind everybody that, you know, wild incompetence is in some ways better than like straight evil and brilliant, right? Because straight evil and brilliant kills people. Wild incompetence may by accident, but it won't be as bad. So, you know, that's the one thing that I keep looking toward. You know, they're not all Stephen Miller, thank the gods. So in any event, that's where we are today. Now, I just want to say one other thing here, because I've had a whole debate about Monday. Many of you know that I have been, you know, I'm going to watch it. And I've said I'm going to watch it. And I have reminded all of you that not watching it is not activism, and wearing black is not activism, and action and community is really what we need right now. I do want to say though, like, you got to do you. And I don't think anybody should, you know, a couple people I think misunderstood me last week. Like, I'm not telling you guys to go watch the inaugural, right? You have to make a decision about what to do. I just don't want anybody to be under the illusion that not watching is somehow like taking action. It's not. It's just like turning off your television set. It doesn't do anything to benefit anybody else. It doesn't do anything to benefit the community. Donald Trump is not going to care. He's going to lie anyway about his numbers. It's really like an irrelevant thing. So watch or not watch, whatever makes the most sense for you. You know, watching is kind of like a job requirement for me these days. So I'm going to be watching it. There's not going to be a broadcast on Monday because it is MLK Day, and there are service actions that are happening here that my family's going to be a part of for a chunk of the day. But I do just want to say this, okay? Like, and we've talked about this a fair amount of time over the last couple of weeks. Please make sure that, given what we are expecting next week, you have a plan right now for how you're going to regulate, what you're going to do to take care of yourself, how you're going to bear witness or not, what it is that you're going to choose to do when things go sideways. Because one of the things that I can pretty much predict right now is that we're definitely going to have immigration raids like as soon as Tuesday. They will probably be filmed. They will be brutal. And there's no question, because it's been signaled, and some of it has started already in Bakersfield, California, that that is what is coming. So I want people to be thoughtful about your engagement, right? This is a really good moment, by the way, to donate to immigration rights groups or to participate in organizing efforts where you live related to those. But I also want people to be thinking about, like, what is your caretaking going to be as we move through this? What's that going to look like? Because it's going to be hard. Like, it's going to be hard. It's going to be awful. And I think we're all going to need to be in community with one another. I, of course, will be here. Hopefully you will be here, you know, talking through it in real time. There will not be a broadcast on Monday, though. That much is clear. We'll return on Tuesday to deal with the aftermath, because there doubtless will be some, and the ongoing events that are going to be underway as soon as he takes the oath. So yeah, so that's that. In the interim, we can all have a good laugh at Rudy Giuliani. That's like the saving grace of today. All right, my friends. I want to remind you that our new program, the Dual Power Accelerator, which we started running right after the election. Our second cohort is open for registration now. If you do not know how to build community where you live, if you've never actually engaged in community building with others or with organizations, you should consider getting in on this. We do still have a limited number of scholarships left, so you can apply if you're in need, but the class starts on February 4th. Everybody who is in it, who is a regular viewer here, will tell you that this has been an extraordinary experience so far for those who have been in the program, and we're really proud of the work that we've done there. So if you're not in it, I want to strongly encourage you to do it, not just because it'll teach you how to build community where you live, but because the group itself, like the people who are in this course, who are staying in it, by the way, like once you're in it for life, right? Like until we decide to stop running it. The people, the hundreds now of people who have been through our first cohort are going to be there to support all of you on your journey through it again. So you will be immediately joining an incredible community of people who are already organizing, mobilizing where they live, in community with one another in that community, which, by the way, is not on a Broligarch-owned platform, and who are they're really supporting one another through all of it. So I hope you will consider joining us in the Dual Power Accelerator. Again, that link is GaiaLeadershipProject.com/dual-power-accelerator. I will, of course, as always, drop a link up here when we're done, but it's in the box below this broadcast as well. There's a link there. And I just want to send everybody here like a lot of love and soothing, because I think we all really, really need it right now. We need caretaking. We need caregiving. And we need to do what we can to kind of get through all of this together. All right, my friends, lots of love. I'll see you all here tomorrow, regular time. There will be a progressive coffee hour this weekend for our Patreon subscribers, probably on Sunday afternoon like there was last week, but stay tuned for a time. And of course, if you want to join that, you can head on over to Patreon and become a subscriber and join us this weekend for Progressive Coffee Hour, which is our kind of like lighter, ask me anything kind of event every weekend. And other than that, I will catch you all here tomorrow, regular time. All right, hang in there, everybody. Lots of love. See you soon. Bye.